Inside the Deck is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, sellers of Magic the Gathering and many other card and board games. GatheringMagic.com, #1 resource on Magic the Gathering, strategy, and culture.
My name is Chris Andersen, or if you'd rather, Cranderson, and I'm playing Elves as I always do, for the most part. Basically, the game plan is you put out a bunch of creatures that draw you cards and make you mana, so that lets you draw into more creatures that let you make more mana and draw more cards, and eventually you either cast a natural order and go get a giant fatty and win the game, or you cast Glimpse of Nature, which lets you draw your deck and put 30 creatures into play and then cast your giant fatty and win the game. It has been a niche deck for a while, but until more recently, it's sort of emerged as, I wouldn't say it's one of the defining decks of the metagame, but I'd say it's like around tier 1.5 or so. My deck's actually a little different. Most people run 2 Craterhoof Behemoths in their deck. I prefer playing 1 Craterhoof Behemoth and 1 Regal Force. The way that you get them into play is usually by casting Natural Order. That lets you cheat them into play usually by turn 3, sometimes if you have a good draw, turn 2. And most of the time you can just win the game at that point. Plan B, I would say, is a Glimpse of Nature. It lets you turn all of your creatures into cantrips, and all of your creatures are very good at making lots of mana. So the more creatures you put into play, the more mana you can make, which lets you keep fueling your draw steps, so that you more or less get to draw your deck. Or if not, get to a natural order and then cast that natural order and win the game. Plan C is Bash with Dudes. There's 30 creatures in this deck, which is much more than most Legacy decks. If you are able to, and you can usually handle almost any ground creatures due to the interaction between Wirewood Symbiote and all of your elves. You get to block, bounce a creature back to your hand. So most creatures are very manageable with this deck. So you can pretty easily overrun them. Ezuri does a lot of help there in being able to like overrun people with creatures, just grinding them out. Going back, the reason I like to play a Regal Force over a Craterhoof Behemoth is that usually when you natural order and have your big guys in your hand, you can't go get them because they're not in your deck. So that's why a lot of people like to play 2 Craterhoof Behemoths. If I got 1 Craterhoof in my hand, I can go get the other one. If I have my Craterhoof Behemoth in my hand, I can still get Regal Force, and I can still draw a bunch of cards, and I'll probably win that game. But when I cast a Green Sun Zenith, casting a Green Sun Zenith for 7 will require you to tap almost all of your elves. And tapped elves aren't very good at attacking. So Craterhoof Behemoth comes into play, all of your elves are tapped, all of your Quirion Rangers and Wirewood Symbiotes have been exhausted their ability, so you can't untap more guys usually by getting to 9 mana. It's not very easy to do even if you have a Cradle in play. So I would rather have a Regal Force when I do that because it doesn't matter if my elves are tapped or untapped, I still get to draw 6 or 7 cards. Sideboard, I got a lot of discard. You have to play it to be able to keep up with combo. Also, the Thoughtseizes are decent against Stoneforge Mystic decks too. They cast their Stoneforge, get Jitte or something. Then you're like, yep, no Jitte for you. Meekstone is specifically targeted against Rug Delver. Every single creature in their deck has 3 or more power, and it's the only way they can beat you is really by attacking with creatures. Scavenging Ooze, just more graveyard hate. Reanimator, like I said earlier, is really bad for me. Dredge isn't too great either, so being able to get a good Green Sun Zenith target to be able to shut them down is really important. It's also decent against Rug Delver too. It gets bigger than all of their guys, and they don't really have a good way to kill it because all they've got is a bolt, and I guess they can submerge it too. 4th Natural Order, having a Natural Order countered is pretty bad for you since you have to sacrifice the creature as part of the cost. So whenever they can't really interact with Natural Order, or at least they can't counter it, Progenitus is for decks that basically can't combo you, so most of those decks can't really deal with a Progenitus in play. Gaddock Teeg is good against combo decks, shuts off all of their game-winning spells. Great Green Sun Zenith target, good for 1. Viridian Shaman, if they have artifacts, Jitte, or if you're lucky enough to be paired to Affinity or something like that, then it's fantastic. And Abrupt Decay is just a catch-all for anything. If there's any like artifacts or enchantments or anything that you have a difficult time dealing with, you can usually kill it. My best matchup is an opponent who understands my deck, I guess. My worst matchup is somebody who doesn't understand my deck. The deck is really tricky, and you would be surprised how many onboard tricks opponents will miss. For example, yesterday, somebody cast a Past in Flames when I had a Deathrite Shaman, a Wirewood Symbiote, and a Quirion Ranger in play, so I just untapped my Deathrite Shaman twice and got rid of his tutor, and he couldn't Past in Flames. I had the counter to his play on board, he just didn't see it. And that kind of stuff happens a surprising amount of time. As far as like, there are a couple matchups that are like really bad. Reanimator's really rough. Elesh Norn basically colds my entire deck, so if they can get an Elesh Norn and play, I'm toast. Also, Countertop is pretty bad because Counterbalance basically, like a lot of my cards cost 1 or 2. And Terminus is an instant speed Wrath of God, which is really brutal when I'm going all in on like a Natural Order and Glimpse of Nature. Usually it's fine to go all in on my turn, but since they can do it at an instant speed, it's pretty devastating. Legacy is usually it's a very wide open format where you can play any number of like 25 different decks and you have the capacity to win a tournament with them. But it's more important to play a deck that you understand than it is to play a good deck. Obviously, if you can play a good deck that you also understand, that's best. But a lot of people, when they play Legacy, they don't really know the format very well, and they don't even know their own deck very well. And just the fact that you're able to know your deck gives you a huge advantage, and one that can more than make up for the fact that your deck may not be like a tier 1 deck at the time. Basically, Legacy is an incredibly wide open format. You can do whatever you want. If you like putting giant fatties into play, then play Sneak and Show or Reanimator or something. If you like casting a bunch of spells and tendrilsing them, play Storm. If you like casting Jace the Mind Sculptor and Stoneforge Mystic, play Stoneblade or something like that. If you like drawing a bunch of cards and making a bunch of mana and attacking with a bunch of creatures, then play Elves. I think drawing cards is one of the most fun things you can do playing Magic, and making mana is probably like second or third most fun thing you can do playing Magic. So that's why I love to play this deck. It's obviously it helps a lot that it's pretty good too, but like I had said earlier, everything in Legacy is pretty good. So find the deck that you love and play that.